Hey everyone, Sparrow here, and today we're going to talk about a sensitive topic. We're going to talk about how to set boundaries with your narcissistic mother. This is a toughie, guys. This is a toughie. And when I work with clients who have narcissistic moms, they're typically so high-strung, stressed out, codependent, and feeling responsible for their mom's feelings, because that's really what mom taught them early on in life, from a very early age. And there's different types of narcissistic moms, but a lot of times we get parentified early on. We have a lot of responsibility early on because the narcissistic mother can't handle it. They get overwhelmed. They're hair triggers, so they tend to yell a lot. So our nervous systems are damaged or, sensitive. And there's oftentimes a real sense of guilt, shame, and worthlessness that our narcissistic mothers just sort of pour into us when we're little. So to sit here and say, hey, it's really easy to set a boundary with your narcissistic mom, that's just really naive, and I'm not even going to say that. What I'm going to say first and foremost is, if you are still struggling with a narcissistic mother, then before you even think about setting boundaries, what really needs to happen is you get to work on you. You get to work on your self-worth, on your self-esteem, on your codependent tendencies. And the stronger you become, then it's easier to set the boundary. So I can give you the things to say, and I will today. I will do that. But until you really feel it, until you can sustain it, then, it's kind of like reading a diet book, but, I'm not ready to start the diet. So we have to get ready to start the diet, right? So how we do that is to really go inside. And a lot of times professional help can work wonders. My book, Uncaged, Trauma Recovery Using Facet Integration Technique, is a great place to start. It's a workbook and a book all in one. And it's for anyone who has any kind of trauma in their past or present, but specifically narcissistic abuse. This is going to be really helpful because it teaches you how to really get to know yourself throughout your developmental stages in life. Early stage, 3 to 5, a grade school, junior high, middle school, high school, and then late adolescent, early adult. How to get to know yourself. What happened to you in each of those stages that caused you to develop fears or false narratives or hurts or wounds? And, what are the things that we're still holding on to? What did mom do or say that really harmed our development? Because we kind of have to go back in time and reclaim those children. A lot of times we talk about the inner child. There's more than one inner child, and they all belong to us. And it's really our job to love those inner children, parent them, and really help them feel like they are valuable, they are worthy. And a lot of times, with a narcissistic mother, you didn't get that. She was the valuable one. She was the worthy one. She was the entitled one. And, you were there to maybe live on fumes or live on scraps, right? Am I getting somewhere? So really, really important for you to work on yourself first. And the other reason for that is because when you start setting a boundary with a narcissistic person, especially a mom, they're so conniving, they're so manipulative oftentimes, and they will know exactly, they've known you your whole life. They'll know exactly what to do and say to derail you. And then before you know it, you're having a meltdown, you're yelling and screaming, you're hyperventilating, you're feeling all the stress. And it's because we still don't have that deep sense of worthiness that is so important when we embark upon this journey. So my book really helps in that department, helping you feel that sense of worth, that sense of value. And, one of the things that is supposed to happen early on in life that doesn't happen with a narcissistic mother typically is we're supposed to feel cherished. We're supposed to feel seen and cherished and valued. And especially in that 3 to 5 stage, we're really supposed to feel cherished. And we don't have that. Typically what happens is we feel undervalued. We are made to feel shame, a lot of shame and worthlessness. And, even though you've had maybe some counseling and you've read some self-help books and here you are in adulthood, I promise you there's still some traces of that are still inside. And that's why the mom is triggering you so much. And that's why we let her still have so much control over our lives, is because we haven't gone back and truly healed those little children, those earlier phases of us. They're still holding on to hurts. They're still wanting to be seen, right? So a lot of times you might want to sit and ask yourself, as much as my mother drives me nuts, as much as she drains my energy, as much as she, really complicates my life and adds, just chaos and drama, is there a little part of me that still wants to be seen by her? And if there is, we have to work with it. And the real deal is, that's where you have to go back in time and see yourself. And see yourself then, bring that little girl or little boy up into the present moment and see them now as well. So go back and see them back then. Who was I back then? Who was she or who was he? And then bring them to present time with you. And who is she now or who is he now? And see them every day. And that's really one of the biggest steps that you can take to start distancing yourself and really pulling away from that enmeshment, that negative enmeshment that we have with a narcissistic mother that can really, sadly, ruin our lives if we don't get a hold of it. It really can. And, you might, if you have children, you might find yourself saying things to your children and then you go, oh my gosh, I'm turning into my mom, or my mother used to say that to me. And that is another sure sign of, okay, I've got to do some more inner work on myself. So some things you can say to mom, or, some boundaries that you can set with mom. First of all, one of the things that I had to do, I had a narcissistic mother. She's now passed away, but she was very difficult to deal with for a number of years. And one of the things that I had to do was say, Mom, I can't call you every week. I can call you once a month. And, of course, she was really upset, but I couldn't do the interaction every week. It was just too much for my nervous system. I hung up the phone feeling depressed, drained. I wanted to take a nap or pour a glass of wine and just, check out. I couldn't do it. And so what I did instead was I called her once a week, and she was living in an assisted living facility. And then in between, I wrote her letters. And, I just wrote her letters, this is what's going on, hope you're well, blah, blah, blah. And, it wasn't really a back and forth. It was just me letting her know I cared and, let her know I was thinking about her, but it wasn't a direct conversation. And I had a sister, by the way, who for the longest time spoke to my mother every day. And this sister ended up having tremendous anxiety, tremendous depression, neuroticism, all kinds of things. I mean, an addiction. She just really, really struggled. And, as she got healthier and as she stopped talking to mom every day or even every week, she became much healthier, and she was able to set some boundaries and just really reduce that anxiety level. So really, truly ask yourself, how much of myself do I have to give to mom? If mom lives in the same town or lives up the street. And I've even known people who sadly have to live with their mom. So, here they have a narcissistic mom who's just like always in their space. I don't know how this person does that, by the way. Very, very challenging. But long story short, ask yourself, okay, what do I reasonably have to give? Now, of course, when you set a boundary there, mom's going to go off the rails and she's going to say, you're a terrible daughter or a terrible son, you're this, you're that, and da-da-da-da-da. And that's when we just have to take that deep breath and say, I bet it seems that way, Mom. I bet it seems that way. Or, thank you for sharing. Sometimes we don't say anything. We just go, And when Mom, starts pulling out the big guns and then has other people starting to call you saying, hey, you really need to call your mom, or you need to da-da-da-da. Hey, thank you for your concern. I'll seriously consider what you've had to say. And I choose not to discuss this with you any further. Thank you so much, though. Let's talk about you. How are you? How's the farm? See my point? Take control of that conversation And what's really important, and I take a lot of cues from Love and Logic parenting. Love and Logic parenting is a fantastic parenting approach, in my opinion, for raising children. And it's also wonderful for dealing with difficult people in general, difficult family members, narcissistic family members, because you're taking the emotion out when you're having to set a boundary or having to confront them. But you're putting all the emotion in when you're praising somebody. You're saying, great job on this, mom, or mom, I'm really happy for you, blah, 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 blah. Then we can put the emotion in. When we're setting the boundary or having to do any kind of confrontation, we're taking the emotion out. And Love and Logic has a list of inarguable statements. I highly suggest you research it. But the inarguable statements are things like, hey, I love you way too much to argue. Thanks for sharing. I bet it feels that way. Those kinds of things that, a person really can't argue with directly. Now, of course, a narcissist will try, and then you'll just keep repeating yourself. Like I said, Mom, I love you too much to argue. Like I said, Mom, love you too much to argue. You can say that 12 times. You can say that 15 times, and that's okay. And when they get really mad and they get really frustrated, just like when you're parenting kids, it's working. When your kids are like, I have a lot of families I've worked with in the past, and they say, when I start using Love and Logic, my kid says, I don't like whatever you're doing. And they throw a fit about it, and that's how you know it's working. So great. So use some statements like that, the inarguable statements. I love you too much to argue. I bet it feels that way. Thanks for sharing. Right? Or you can say things like, oh, bummer, right? Things like that. When you have to directly confront something with mom, remember, just take a deep breath and think about I statements. Mom, when you do this or say this, I feel, right? I feel like you're trying to guilt me. And that's another question you can ask mom, when she does lay on the guilt. Hey, Mom, are you trying to make me feel guilty? And a lot of times she'll, no, well, of course not, but. Well, no, it feels like you're trying to make me feel guilty. Mom, I'm not going to feel guilty about this topic. Or I'm not going to feel guilty about this situation. I love you very much, and I can't make it to Christmas this year. It's just not going to work for me. And that is my number one favorite statement. If you could write that down on 10 sticky notes and put them everywhere. That doesn't work for me. It is the most kind, loving thing you can do for yourself is to say those words. And you can say them to your neighbor. You can say them to your friend. You can say that to your mom, anyone, even your kid. I'm so sorry, that doesn't work for me. Definitely your spouse. And you might have to say that frequently sometimes. Because if you have a narcissistic mom, chances are you might have a narcissistic spouse. That is just sometimes how it goes, sadly, because we marry what is familiar oftentimes. So that just doesn't work for me, Mom. And then mom's going on and on. Oh, I can't believe you'd say that. Oh, that's just so disrespectful. Da, 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 da. I can't believe you're not coming. Everybody's coming and you're not going to come. I'm so sorry, Mom, I hear you. That just doesn't work for me. And you don't even have to say that I'm so sorry if you don't want to. Sometimes I put that in there to soften it a bit, but you don't have to. Hey, Mom, I hear what you're saying, and that just doesn't work for me. Okay? If you're talking to mom and she's gossiping about a family member or gossiping about somebody else or just saying something negative, I love you, Mom, and this conversation is draining me. I'm going to let you go now. Okay? That might seem harsh. You practice it, you use it a couple of times, and it's going to be okay. You're going to realize, wow, I have the right to tell somebody when something is draining me. Yeah, Mom, this conversation is draining my energy, or it's really draining me. Or, Mom, I love you. It makes me uncomfortable when you talk about so-and-so. Can we please change the subject? And by the way, I wanted to ask you, how's that quilt you're making? And we change the subject, but I've confronted it, right? And sometimes, if you want to be really savvy, you can just change the subject and not confront it. But if it's happening enough times, go ahead and confront it. Mom, that makes me really uncomfortable. And here's the deal. When mom has her reaction, you have to let it roll off you because you're not responsible for how she feels. And you got to hear that. You don't need to fix and protect mom. If mom wants to get upset, if mom wants to be a hair trigger, that is her choice. You're not responsible for it. And by the way, I think it's page 70 in my book. I have a chart. In that chart, it shows you on one column when I'm responsible for someone, these are all the things I do, which is the crux of codependency, versus when I'm responsible to somebody. And we're responsible to other people for sure, but we're not always responsible for them. And it's really important for you to discern, hey, wait a minute, am I trying to fix and protect mom? Or am I just letting her have her meltdown? And if she has a meltdown, you can say, hey mom, it sounds like you're really having a bad day or having a bad moment. I'm gonna let you go process that and let's pick up next week, right? And if it's a face-to-face kind of thing, I know it's a little more difficult, same thing. I am gonna make a follow-up video for moms who are super difficult, super narcissistic, some things that you might have to really do and say in the moment to put your foot down. I will make that video next. But in the meantime, if you like this video, click on the link below on the birdcage and subscribe. And then go ahead and go to my website, sparrowspalding.com. I've got a couple of things you might find interesting on there, including my latest book, Uncaged, Trauma Recovery Using Facet Integration Technique. This is a manual for anyone who has suffered narcissistic abuse. This really helps you get to work on you. So like I said in the beginning, if you're having issues with your narcissistic mom, unfortunately, it really comes back to you at this point, working on yourself, because mom's not changing. She's not going to change. And just to be realistic, as she gets older, she very well may get worse. So it's going to be really important that you dial into yourself, pour into yourself, and really build that self-worth that will give you the motivation and the impetus to say, no more, mom, I'm not going to take your bullshit anymore. Make sense? All right, guys, as always, hug yourself from me, and I'll see you next time.